Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this lab talk titled Building Creative Communities. I'm Fabio Sgarai, I'm Head of Innovation of FGB, which is a European think tank and working on issues such as the technological impact on the labor market and innovation in urban environments. And we are the lead partner of this project called the Laboratori Aperti Open Laboratories, which is a very interesting project promoted by the Emilia-Romagna region, which funded the development of 10 hubs for innovation in 10 different cities in the region, the 10 main cities. And those hubs are physical hubs, so they are hosted within large post-industrial buildings that have been regenerated and given back to the community with the purpose of educating and training young people on the future of work and the impact on technologies and on the potential for digital transformation. And it's part of the job of these laboratories which we are heading to actually explore some of the pressing issues of our time and to also explore some different dimensions of innovation and how it happens. And that's why we are promoting this series of talks online. Given the coronavirus crisis, we usually host these talks live in our centers, and now we are hosting them live on internet. So for those connecting via Zoom, you can ask any questions during the talk to myself and to our guests. So I'm going to introduce in a minute by using the Q&A function. And for those following us live on Facebook, you can actually type your question on the comment box of the Facebook page, and my colleagues will report those questions to me. So this talk is actually promoted by one laboratory in particular. It's Modena, and we're very happy that Modena is promoting this talk. And actually it's co-promoted by a number of partners, and of course the other 4 out of 10 of the laboratories that we manage in the region. Now let me get to the topic of today. So building creative communities. Now it's, I will start with the notion of, why it is important to build creative communities, because it relates back to the possibility for organizations of any size and for organizations of any type, being them public or private, to increase their access to innovative ideas and also to innovative solutions. So this very notion of open innovation, to crowdsource intelligence, so actually to connect to a variety of people within and around the organization in order to get fresh ideas, to get inputs, and to actually brainstorm and come up with new potential solutions to either organizational or public challenges, depending on whether the organization is private or public. So today we're going to explore this very interesting topic with 2 very distinguished guests, and I'm going to introduce them now. So Marian Plasschaert, I hope I pronounced your surname well, Marian, is an old friend of mine. We've been working together a couple of professional lives ago for the same company that Marian works for, which is PwC. Marian has a very important role within the organization. Is heading the partners and leadership development programs for the Europe, Middle East, and Africa regions. Just to add, but then of course I will let the 2 guests introduce themselves. PwC is a very large multinational. It's got hundreds of thousands of employees in virtually every country in the world. So I'm very happy that Marian is with us and to connect again to this old friend. And Jochem Coolman, I will probably pronounce this not precisely as he should, is a newly acquired friend. We are currently working together on a European funded project connecting a network of 7 cities working on innovation in local administrations. And Jochem is innovation officer for the city of Rotterdam, a city that is one of the leading cities in Europe when it comes to innovation. And Jochem is in charge of actually managing a collaborative community within and around the city. So again, another guest that can bring some insights on the topic of today. So that's the introduction, and now we'll leave to Marian and Jochem to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more on what they do on a daily basis and why what they do is connected to the topic of today. Jochem, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jochem Coolman. You're right, Fabio. It wasn't perfect, but it was very close to perfection. So congratulations. Yeah, we've known each other for a number of years. I think almost 2 years now. My role in the municipality of Rotterdam is that of innovation officer or community manager of innovation. And I'll explain briefly. The first part of my job, the innovation officer, is about a simple task. Well, we call it simple, but it isn't. It's quite difficult to grasp. It's about increasing and supporting the innovative capacity of the city. And that means both the people working for the city as well as the people living in the city, and the people working in the city, and the people learning in the city. So all stakeholders of the quadruple helix. And we do that by focusing on networking ability, getting people in the right energy, giving them the right methods and tools to become more innovative. That's the first part of my job. The second part is that of community manager. And that actually involves getting people together who are interested in new ideas or new things, in new technologies, in innovation in general. And we've been working on the community for about 6-7 years now. And in the beginning, it was about 20 of us, 20 intrinsically motivated colleagues or people in our network that wanted to work together. And after a few years, and I'll probably tell a bit more during this hour, at this moment, we have about 2,000 civil servants in our innovation network, plus an extra 500 external partners from a variety of industries that are connected. So yeah, and we manage both. So we do the process of innovation as well as the community of innovation at the same time.
That's great, Jochem, and you know, we'll go step by step and explore any of the dimensions that you just touched upon. Marian.
Thank you, and great to be here actually on the call with you. Wherever you are at home, similar to me. So I'm calling in from close to Geneva. Behind me, that's not a wallpaper. It's actually the old library. I put it together with my brother. It's 500 kilos heavy. Fabio has a wallpaper behind him, if you are wondering. And I'm Jochem. That's the map of Rotterdam, if you haven't recognized it yet. So I'm curious when you will be asking questions later on, what's behind your background. So in terms of me, I will talk as well, similar to Jochem, about two parts to my role and the examples which I would like to share. And I think in the outline, in terms of what you want to get out of this session, Fabio put it together very well. You know, it's about the power of collective intelligence, how we can encourage participation in our communities, reinforce their engagement. And I would like to use examples from those two parts of my role. The first one is that I lead an internal business school in PwC. And in this internal business school, we have a 15, 16 leadership development programs. And I pick up one particular one, which apart from sort of imparting the knowledge and help our leaders to become better client service leaders, we intend as well to create a community of the participants, which will be more sort of a long lasting. So that's the one type of example I will use from my practice. The second one would be in my role of leading partner development in the company. We have a number of territories who appointed their country leaders. And I manage and lead the community of these country leaders for joint decision-making, alignment, and greater consistency. So that's what I'm going to do throughout today.
Great. Thank you very much, both. If you don't mind, I will put it up our little structure that we have prepared so that you know, we can share with participants what we have in mind to talk about today. And actually, you know, there are a few dimensions that we like to explore about the notion of creative communities. And the first one is actually where to start from. Where to start from is a function of an intention, it's a function of leadership, and it's a function of providing a mission to the community and making an invitation. So this, you know, this very first step of setting up a community has got a lot to do with the why and has got a lot to do with, you know, giving people a reason to participate and to provide their knowledge and to get something in return out of it. So Jochem, from your experience, is that right? And how did you do it in your case?
Oh, I'll go into the second part of the question first. Well, the why. How do you get the community together on a point that they share? I mean, in Rotterdam, a city that has a long history of struggles, like a bombardment in the Second World War, a flooding in the 50s, etc., etc., economic downfall in the 80s. We're used to struggling, and there's a large struggle going on in a large number of cities around the world. I mean, I think in all of the cities. For example, just the shift from analog to digital technologies, fossil fuel to sustainable energy, a change in economic perspectives, going to a platform economy. So there's a lot of reasons, a lot of why we're interested in change. It's not, the change isn't the goal, but dealing with changing circumstances, that's what we're dealing with. And what we found out in Rotterdam in our innovation network is that giving the people a place to come together and talk about these changes and leading them in talking about it, that actually helps the best. So we're not focusing on specific parts of our municipality. Our invites to our inspiration sessions, to our lectures, they're all open, and they deal with paradoxal leadership or digital transformation. Recently we talked about ethics. We'll probably talk about copyright in a few months. These are all subjects that sort of you can read between the lines when you listen to the media, and these are topics that people share. And our experience is that if we give people reasons to talk to each other without having to think about their function or their location in their company or in the municipality, it actually helps to create the dialogue and to start a community. So.
Thank you, Jochem. And of course, you know, in your case, we're talking about a public authority, so a local administration, the city of Rotterdam. So the challenges that you talk about with your community are actually challenges related to the cities and to the development of the cities and how to make the life of the citizens better. And it's interesting where, you know, one of the things that you said, that actually people participating and providing their point of view, or their, you know, they participate in discussing about these challenges and providing some solutions. What they get in return is a lot of inspiring sessions and new knowledge that can, you know, that they can use in their professional and personal lives, but also give back into the network, into the community. And Marian, what is your experience about this very first step of building creative communities? How do we start?
Yeah, actually very similar, and building on what Jochem has said, maybe there could be one bullet point before them, and that's the context. Understanding the context, and in this case, Jochem, you were talking about a lot of elements of change happening around us, and we would like to respond to it or shape whatever is emerging as a result of the change. So I think good understanding of the context would be perhaps the starting point. Then understand, and in my case, I will sort of narrow it down on the community or around 35 colleagues that I built in the firm, people sort of responsible for leadership development. So I had my intention, but it was as well important for me to understand other people. What do they need? What they could be interested in? And often it sort of starts, you know, with sort of and you've seen it before, you know, the 3 psychological needs which people have, you know, ABC, I call them. The first one is for autonomy, to have some sort of a control. The B is for belonging. People want to belong. And C is for sort of a use of their capability, use of their strengths. People generally want to be useful, you know. So in that community that I wanted to build, and this is the process, we are now 18 months through the process since the start of this community to this point. For me, understanding actually, okay, what is my intention, but what is their intention, what is their interest, that has been quite important at the outset. And then Fabio, please.
No, you conclude and then I will make a couple of remarks, please.
Yeah, please interrupt me anytime. And then it's both of you, Fabio and Jochem, as well, for people on the call. The last one, which I would like to pick up on, is in terms of a difference, in terms of an invitation. So I think to have a clarity about what that community is for. And in Jochem's case, it was really sort of a sharing regardless of your position. And I very much like it, because to my mind, that's the notion of communities, that regardless of the hierarchy that we have in my organization, PwC, whatever, more than 100 years old organization, what is happening, we try to flattening the grades. You know, that people actually can talk to each other and work in agile way, regarding how long you were in the company or what your position is. And so with regard to who to invite to the group, it's important for me, at least, what it is going to be for. And I wanted to really establish it as a sort of as well, decision-making community. So actually, I wanted to have only one single person from one territory to represent the voice of that country. And that was quite interesting. So I would say there are some of those sort of open invitation, come whoever is interested in. But as well, I have evolved to the place, at least with this community, let's narrow it down to the target audience that I want to influence, and that everyone in this community needs to give and get something. I pause there, Fabio.
Okay, so there are actually more than one things that you said that it would be interesting to explore a little bit more. First of all, you used a very sophisticated term, which is emergence, that I know Jochem is also a big fan of, and that I think it's important to underline, because emergence, it's not a matter of emergency, although in these times it could well be, but emergence means what wants to emerge out of the future and come into the reality. And that is very much about innovation, is letting something new get into the reality, become real. And this emergence is a process that has got a lot to do with collectives rather than individuals. At least that's my conviction, because when you get a collective, you are able to pull together different sensibilities, different type of knowledge, different type of visions about the future, and different type of interpretations of these weak signals coming from the future. And so as a collective, you're able to, if you're able to really pull together all these strings, then you are able to, identify and give shape, to this emergence, or what is about to emerge. So that's a very important point in my view when it comes to community of the kind that we are talking about. So communities that can help innovation to come into reality. And then the other thing interesting that you said is that, you made an explicit decision. You wanted a community which had to do with decision making. So you actually selected and invited and picked the components of your community, and then worked with them to let them become and feel like a community. Whilst in the case of Rotterdam, Jochem, correct me if I'm wrong, it's an open invitation. Whoever cares about the city and the future of the city can join, and the more the merrier. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, if I can follow up on that. It was interesting to hear how Marian organized it around the decision makers, or at least the representatives who were able to make decisions. Our not just philosophy, but experience in Rotterdam is that we look at our community in the role they play, and I'll explain briefly about that. There's a theory on the adoption of innovation. Probably the people watching this are familiar with it. It's a bell curve, a norm curve, where it starts with the innovator, and it has early adopters, it has an early majority, a late majority, and then it follows in the end with laggards. This sort of looks like a time frame. So it starts with the innovators who have an innovation, and it ends with the laggards finally, grumpy as it is, accepting that there's a change. But if you look at it in a different way, you can also see the roles that people play in that bell curve. And these roles are actually what people have as energy. And I'll try to explain really briefly about it, and then I'll come to the point. The first group of people are the ones that are inquisitive. They want to go out, explore the world, see what new technologies, techniques, or new research can do for them. And they go out in the world and they come back with a lot of interesting things, and they share it with the people. And the last thing they want to do is have these people that they shared with tell them, why, great idea, go and work it out, make a business plan, scale it up and make it normal. The first thing they want to do is go out and explore a little bit further. The second group is more about the engagers, the entrepreneurs, that they want to pick up the ideas that are thrown at them from the inquisitive people and work upon it with the business cases, etc. Then it follows with a large majority, and it ends with the laggards, who are sort of guardians. These guardians you'll find in big companies, you'll find them in large municipalities, even smaller municipalities. These guardians want to do one thing, and that is keeping the status quo as is. They don't like change. They've organized a bureaucracy, they've organized processes, they've organized mandates, and they want to keep it. And our experience is that it's really problematic to invite decision makers to an innovation, because these decision makers are usually in the area where the guardians and the people who like the status quo are at. So our experience is that it's better to openly invite everybody and to share them with open ideas and new mindsets. And of course, there are managers and directors that feel invited, and of course they can come anytime. But our experience is that we shouldn't invite the decision makers in the first place. Of course, in the second or third place, yes, but not in the first place.
So it's a different approach, because I think it's different the nature and the purpose of the communities. And that is, again, a learning point out of this conversation, that not all communities are the same, not all communities come around for the same purpose, and that you need to really be clear about the intention and the purpose of the community to actually set it up in the proper way, or actually make the right invitation to the right people. Before moving along our conversation, I just wanted to explore a little bit more the notion of leadership, if that's okay. And the question is, according to your experience, how key is leadership in building a community? Because, community calls for everybody's equal, everybody's on the same page, everybody counts as one, so there are no differences, etc., etc. But then, again, there are some people that say, every community needs leaders. So how do you reconcile these two views?
You're asking who?
Say that again.
You're asking who of the two? Should I respond?
Both of you.
You go ahead first, Jochem.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, Marian. When we started the Innovation Network, and we started inviting people that felt free enough to engage themselves in the community, we sort of picked up the stick that had the name leaders on it. So we started a community to get them started and to energize them and to facilitate them with tools, techniques, but also a location and an interesting speaker. And the true leaders of our municipality, or the people that were really deciding, we didn't try to avoid them, but we weren't out in the open because we were still really small and we were not sure on whether our steps were the right ones. At this moment in Rotterdam, we're acknowledged as absolutely not a force to be reckoned with, but as a serious community, because the people that are involved, they come from all areas of the municipality, as well as from the educational system, the universities, and they engage. And in my opinion, when it comes to innovation and to innovative communities, creative communities, true leadership is allowing for space, allowing for people to give their time to things that they are interested in, the things that they believe in. And I think that is leadership in the innovation sphere.
Well said. And you can just building on it. So the name which I use for it, so in terms of a leadership as a position and leadership as a behavior. And in my experience, it's a leadership as a behavior which is required in communities. And so I would see myself, you know, as somehow who has initiated this particular community of the country representatives on leadership development that I talk about. So I was the leader on this, but I more see myself as sort of the one who was taking the lead at the beginning. And gradually, you know, to enable others to take a lead on the projects that we collectively want to do together. So then obviously, you know, when we talk about the leadership as a position, how can we engage them? And Jochem, I think then in terms of, especially when the communities are new, it's important to protect them. You know that many organizations, they have the incubators, you know, because if they would come in a wild world out there, you know, those small fragile ideas can get easily killed, you know. So actually good way of approaching it is, you know, start small with the trusted people, get some quick wins, you know, get some momentum. I like how you describe it, Jochem, as energy, which goes through this sort of a life cycle of the change. And so my experience is actually quite similar. Someone needs to get started. We need to protect it, gradually start to engage, you know, the leaders, the selectively sort of leaders in the position who can help us with that. But my experience in the business was very similar to yours, Jochem.
Very interesting. There is this point that you made, Marian, about the distinction between the formal organization and the community, and the same that Jochem made about, you know, the formal roles in the organization and the ones in the community. Because I think that when it comes to innovation or open innovation or building creative communities for innovation, we need to get out of the formal structures and actually, you know, try and attempt to actually dissolve formal structures in a different form of collective, because otherwise you remain trapped into the formality of the organization, where everybody has got a clear role and a clear responsibility and a clear mandate, and it's very, very difficult to come up with innovation within certain boundaries. But when you dissolve those boundaries, either internal within the formal structure and you know, between the organization and the outside world, that's where it's more possible to create new connections and to create new opportunities by nurturing these connections. And the kind of leadership, as you well said, it's not about, you know, it's neither a formal leadership and it's not a directive style of leadership, but it's actually a facilitation of leadership. It's more to do with the servant leader rather than, you know, the let's go, you know, follow me to hell kind of leaders, if I understand well your points. Okay, so let's move to the second step along our chain of conversation, because, you know, okay, let's assume we have a group, big, small, that we are, you know, protecting, as Marian said, you know, we are getting some easy wins, we are helping them to find their purpose or to connect to the purpose of the community. So how do we manage a community? There is this very interesting notion of touch points that Jochem taught me when we first talked about the way they manage the communities in Rotterdam. So why don't you, you know, share with the others as well, what are the touch points that you use in managing your community, Jochem?
Yeah, the general idea that we have when we manage the community, and managing the community sounds more strict than I mean it. We have a three-step rocket. That's a Dutch expression, excuse me for that. Our first step is to engage the community members in an inspirational topic. So it can be the example that I gave, paradoxal leadership, or it can be about ethics, it can be about scaling up, it can be about the digital transformation in the world, it can be about a lot of topics, and this is the starting point. So we connect with our community by supplying them, providing them, facilitating them with inspirational lectures. At the end of each lecture, at least the ones that are feasible, we invite the people that are in the room, and usually there are about 200 to 300 people at every meeting, which occurs every 2 months. We invite them, if you like this, if you get enthusiastic about this subject, we're sure that you'll like the deep dive or the the workshop that we've also organized that will be happening in the next few weeks. So we engage the community not only to come and listen and meet each other and talk about current things, but also to get inspired and challenged to make a deep dive, think about what they've heard, and discuss with each other on what how it touches upon their real life situation. So we have an inspiration session, we have knowledge sessions, and we have practice sessions. That's how we call it. And the way we organize our meeting points, which Fabio just referred to, is that we don't only supply them with these physical touch points, we call them touch points. We also supply them with social touch points, like the workshops. And we also work on supplying them with digital touch points. And we learned from the sociologists that we work together with on network sociology for a network. We learned that the better you deal with the variety of touch points that are available, so the digital touch points, the social touch points, as well as the physical touch points, the stronger and the more engaged and the better relationships your peer-to-peer network, your peer-to-peer community can create. So the better you manage the touch points, the better organized and the more stable and the healthier the community becomes. So that's the theory that we put into practice.
Great, Jochem, thanks. Marian, is that your experience as well?
Partly, actually, I will talk shortly how I engage them, but what I wanted to just respond actually to Jochem, how you were describing it, is that what I'm learning from you as well. So, you know, you taught Fabio, now you taught me, another 25 colleagues here in the labs in Italy. But what really resonates with me is this sort of giving people a variety of different touch points. Someone prepares to be digitally, someone likes to be more in person, someone likes to come to drinks, someone likes to come to lecture. So regardless of the sort of a personality type or the learning style, to actually enable, if I want to keep this community open and engaged, that I need to play to the variety, actually what they do. And I'm just thinking actually people who have commitments in the evening, perhaps with the parents, with their children, cannot come in the evening for the drinks. So you may do the breakfast for them, you know, to actually keep them engaged. So I really like it. I really like it. I think it's in terms of the diversity, and obviously, as you have 2,000 plus in your community, it's a different scale to mine, which is sort of a 30 to 40, typically, you know, in a community, both in leadership development programs or actually the group that I work with as a community. But I think that diversity is very important, that we do not end up being the people who are like me or someone who came up with the idea to have that community, because innovation comes from diversity. And I always use example of Switzerland, where I call from. 25% of the population are non-Swiss. They are foreigners in Switzerland, the country with the highest portion of the foreigners in a country. And I think that that's why so many innovations do come from Switzerland, you know, because that is actually the diversity in the group. And moving on from this, talking about the specific tools, I just like to schedule them, these touch points, sort of like a first day every quarter, you know, and everyone knows. So it's very predictable that actually every quarter we have our touch point, which is sort of virtually at 11 o'clock. Every last first day anyway, we have a face-to-face meeting. And those, so people know I have one annual meeting, which I think will still become very important once the sort of restrictions will stop or will be relaxed. People want to see each other. I don't think we get happy by getting likes on Facebook, those of you who get, or the hearts on Instagram. We as well want to have this sort of a direct feedback from the human interaction. So that is not going to go away. And that's why I like how you, Fabio, and Laboratori are set up, that it has both sort of on-site, residential, and online component to it. I think that's very important. And so that's what we do in our community. because people need to fly from various places. So the once a year we see each other face to face. Then quarterly we have sort of, those are the regular meetings for everyone, almost like a town hall. Everyone comes in. And interestingly, you know, we call it, you know, with the residential description, town hall, as you would have it, you know, in the cities. And so then everyone comes. And then in between, there are obviously different projects or the sprints that actually we have on to sort of advance the agenda on the individual projects. So those are hopefully some touch points, tools that people on the call may find helpful.
That's great, guys. And, you know, it's interesting, this notion of having multiple touch points, and also, you know, what I think I've got is that you also need some frequency of meetings, because otherwise, you know, it gets to lose the community or the group of people. And actually, there is a question that came to my mind by listening to you two. In your experience, how much a community needs to have people that you know inside? So how does that make a difference? You know, that people know each other, or that, you know, the community organizers know everybody in the community, or at least most of them in the community. How important is that?
If I can respond, I think it's helpful if people know each other. So the people that join us for the lectures and the inspiration sessions, most of them, or a lot of them, have seen each other before, and maybe they don't know each other yet, but they have the opportunity to get to know each other. But I think that nowadays we're going further and further away from the traditional thinking of an organization in the means of an organizational chart and a hierarchy, where you have the director on the top, you have the managers in between, you have the team leaders right below them, and then you have the people that do the work below them. I think the current organizational chart, or the organizational structure that's becoming more and more relevant, is the loosely based peer-to-peer network, where people find each other depending on the reason that they have in finding each other. So if it's about sustainability, it's all the people in the entire organization that deal with parts or a larger part of sustainability. And the strength of the community, in my opinion, is that it connects the people in understanding each other's reasons. So our best result is to invite the people to come together and to entice them to start discussing with each other. Like going up to somebody that they do not know yet and start talking about their day-to-day challenges, and getting surprised that the other person probably has similar or the same challenges as well, and to connect. And I don't have the intention of knowing all 2,000 people that are in our network. It's more important that the groups, the hybrid groups in the community, know each other and can find each other. So in my opinion, it's about the connections that make sense, or could make sense.
And on my side, just to sort of to give you a number, Fabio, 10 is the number which I'll give you to your question. So the reason why I'm saying so, and this is based on sort of the groups of 40. So let's say I have for this community 40 people on the list. 30 of them come to the quarterly calls, and then I find it possibly sort of 1/3 is the core, with whom I have some meaningful interaction afterwards. We follow up with the call. We send each other emails. Maybe I consult them on the agenda about what we are going to cover. So that's my sort of rule of thumb. You know, perhaps 1/3 of the community. You know, to make sure that actually there is a fire burning. You know, under it, and that is not only me who actually instigate that fire, but there are enough sufficient people who feel engaged that this is important to them.
That's very good. You know, again, the geometry within a community is important. Like, you know, you can have different core groups, or, you know, they can be verticals on specific topics, like Jochem was telling about, you know, the sustainability people, and then the people dealing with, you know, mobility, and people dealing with, you know, any other aspect of the urban system. Or, you know, again, Marian were saying about, you know, we have maybe 1/3 of the community that is really, really engaged, and then, you know, that strong core creates the conditions for the entire community to keep, you know, to keep connected in a way, no? So that it's a diffuse leadership, if you want, kind of notion.
Yeah.
Okay, this is really very interesting for me as well. So thank you very much, and I'd like to move on to the third and last step, you know, of our conversation chain, which is, you know, okay, once you have, you know, made the invitation and have an initial group of people, and then you apply, you create these different touch points, and you start to get to know each other, and you refresh the purpose and the intention, you manage your community, and it grows. It can actually, you know, either grow in intensity, it can grow in scale, it can grow in impact. You know, it doesn't have to scale just in size, you know. A community can also grow in visibility, in importance, in reputation, etc., etc. So once you know, you get to a point in which there is a leap towards something else, how do you recognize that? Like, you know, what changes? You know, is it just a number, or is it a matter of you feel there is something different, that the community has made some sort of step, and how do you encourage that? Or do you let go? Like, you know, do you let them go? So you lose the initial purpose to become something else. I'm becoming too philosophical, I know, but then we'll try to get some practical implications of this. Jochem, you want to start?
Yes, sure. The interesting part of the first bullet that you've written down is results. And what I find interesting in Rotterdam is that in our municipality, our results are, they come from the context of exploitation. They come from the context of being predictable, being accountable for what we're doing, being transparent, and these are all very important values that we have in our municipality. But the large context that was missing, or that's not really embraced too much, is the context of experimentation, learning, trial and error, accepting that we don't really know what might happen if we pull a string or if we press a button. And that's actually the result of learning. So a lot of my colleagues, when we say we tried something in an experiment and they say, so did it work? And we say, no, it didn't. It was a failure. They'll say, okay, it's a failure. It's a miss. We've thrown away money, or we've thrown away our time, our precious time. And my response would be that the best result that I can achieve is to have the community, or have our municipality, accept that learning is actually the best result that we can have if we talk about innovation. If we would talk about results in the normal exploitation context, of course, just learning isn't enough. We need to show the results. We need to focus on KPIs. We need to focus on things that we predicted. But if it's about experimentation, if it's about innovation in my field, the best result is that people accept that learning is also a value and a result. And sharing the value, sharing these lessons is part of the job. And that's actually the result that I'm going for.
Thank you.
Yes. Jochem, thank you for saying it. And I build on that last piece, because that learning is building of the capability. And I think with this terrible crisis, you know, which is happening out there, outside of our homes, I think it's about us being better prepared when the next crisis will come. And I think the learning, as you have described it, that's sort of very, very important, that we increase our capability for whatever may come. And I thought, you know, in particular, as well, the second point which you mentioned, that organizations that try to make themselves very efficient, You know, that efficiently we will achieve with as little money and as little sort of a people resource what we want to do. But where I see the future is that we want to actually engage broader groups of people in that sort of innovation process as you describe it. So back to your question, Fabio, you know, how to notice what's happening with the community. Has it maybe met its purpose, or have the things move on that we need to somehow reinvent ourselves? And I think here that's quite important because, and maybe many of you on the call, you know, from the laboratories in Italy, you would recognize this, is that some of these communities, they are like our babies. We come up with the idea, we nurture them, we look after them, we want them to be a certain way. But with these very children, you know, at certain point, to actually let them go, stop controlling them, knowing that we have done enough actually of our own investment and what we could impart, you know, to that community and to its members. And I think this sort of ability of communities to self-disrupt themselves, that's very important. And obviously there are a lot of symptoms you can observe. Less people start to turn up. The conversation is getting sort of more dry, you know, so there are a lot of those symptoms that you can notice with your community, and something needs to happen then. And of course, as with all good communities, opening up, you know, to discussion, okay, this is what we are noticing. This is what I'm observing. This is how it makes us feel. And Jochem, this is where you started to make the distinction between those sort of hard business results and those soft human connections. Because to make an effective change, we need to actually blend both of them together.
I really loved your point about letting go, and the very idea of a community of people is that people come and go, you know, and they can leave the community, and new people will join the community, and it regenerates itself. It can get, you know, larger, it can shrink, you know, it can shrink because, you know, maybe that's the time to reconvene as a very small core group and rethink about the purpose of it all. Maybe because, you know, it was born to achieve a specific result, and the result was achieved. And therefore, you know, there is no point in keeping the community as such, but it, you know, it stays as nice connections between people that achieved something together. So I guess that probably, you know, the management part of, although managing a community is a counterintuitive kind of thing, because, you know, it's very difficult to think about the management of a community, because a community by definition is something that has a life of its own and has to have a life of its own if it has to be creative. But, you know, the management part then in a maturity stage has to leave, you know, to maybe somebody else taking care of the community, or maybe for some spin-offs to emerge, you know, spontaneously out of the original community and form other communities in other places that you don't have any contact with, or that you have a very weak contacts with. And of course, you know, again, very much depends on the original intention and the purpose and the size and everything else that we've been talking about. But as we approach, you know, the closing of this conversation, I just have, you know, a couple of more questions for the two of you. And that is, you know, the first one really relates to your own experiences as community facilitators, okay? Because you have talked a lot about the importance of learning as a result. So the first question is, what did you personally learn out of facilitating a community?
That is difficult to accept, the lessons learned, the lessons to be learned. Now, the thing that I learned the most is to accept that I don't know things, that I'm getting more and more used to starting things where I know that the thought that I had and my colleagues had on developing the step that we wanted to take was good enough, and that we accept that we need to learn and become iterative and more, and that we need to take smaller steps. That's the thing that I learned. Previously, I was more into project development things, and the start of the project couldn't happen until we knew the end result. And that's absolutely something I've learned from being in an innovative environment is, to accept the unknown, and also to accept that even though we start and we thought about risks, that we don't deal with all the risks, only the risks that we see coming, but not the risk that we failed to see. The coronavirus, for example, is something that we saw, but we neglected. We didn't take into account strongly enough. And that's something we need to be open about, and we need to be agile enough and resilient enough to deal with that. I'm not saying I'm there yet, but I know I'm on the right track now. So that's what I've been learning.
I love the notion of not knowing. I remember one of my students once wanted to write a thesis on, how can I be wrong? So I thought it was hilarious.
So he asked you what the result of his thesis was, and you said, no, you were wrong. So you were right.
Yes.
You were wrong.
And you, Marian? Sorry?
Yeah, partly, Jochem, as you were describing it, sort of being humble about this, and I add to it is, that obviously at the beginning, and I presume that many people who are part of these labs in Emilia-Romagna region, that actually you are the people who like to initiate things, engage into activities. You bring your enthusiasm, you bring your energy into projects, the same as I try to do. And, and that will get us to a certain point. At certain point, that actually we need to get past this sort of a critical mass of people, that we succeed to enthuse sufficient number of people who are able to carry it forward without us, and to sort of accept, the different roles that we may play in this process. So that's maybe my addition, Jochem, to what you have said, is that I find it's good to bring the energy and enthusiasm, but at some point we need actually more people that would share it with us. And in particular, I find this difficult into multi-sector, multi-stakeholder setups. Relatively, the business context, doing just business, it's okay, it's manageable. People are relatively alike. Maybe starting to do it at the municipal level, that sort of starts easier. But when you start to bring sort of the public sector and the non-profit organizations and the academia into it, and that is really becoming really difficult. And if I understand it right, Fabio and others on the call, what you do, I just want to encourage you that don't stop doing it because it's difficult. Because in my experience, setting up this endeavor as you are doing it, that will only produce the sustainable solution and shape the world and our communities the way we want to see them. So maybe that was the learning for me as the sort of managing communities for a few years.
Great. Very last question for both of you, and we go back to the very beginning of our conversation, again about the intention and purpose. And the question is, for you personally, bringing in, or providing or giving intention and purpose to a community, is it an intellectual exercise, or is it something more than an intellectual exercise? Who wants to answer first?
I start first. I made a note when Jochem was speaking, it was about its difference to sort of a typical organizational setups, which are there to be efficient, structured, and achieve results. And to me, big difference in communities that we do care, so actually to bring our heart into it is, to my mind, what makes a difference, that it's not only about how people think about it, but how they feel about it and how they are excited, to connect with each other at a human level.
Thank you, Marian.
Yeah, the experience we had in at least the things that we've been doing is very practical, is really down to earth, and it's really about people. Like Marian said, it's about following your heart, doing what you feel is right. And I'm from the city of Rotterdam. I was born and raised there. So for me, going to work, dealing with the challenges that face our city tomorrow is easy, because I just look in my heart and see whether the choices that I make today, even though I don't know the end result, whether they're good enough, is what I can tell myself by following my heart. And yeah, and it's also, but it's also about sort of becoming a small empirical scientist in the same time, because we do want to share our knowledge, and that's what scientists are educated to do. They pick up the knowledge, they pick up the working principles in what they've experienced, and that's what they're sharing. And so we're sort of balancing on both ends. We're following our hearts, doing what we feel is right, but we're also trying to focus on our community and sharing our experiences in a way that is both communicative as well as giving value to the practices that we've experienced. So it's sort of a both answer. I don't know if it's helpful, but that's what you have to do with. Sorry.
Everything that you said is very helpful. Marian, Jochem, thank you so much for sharing with us your insights and your experiences on this topic. We really do appreciate it. And thank you for the great work you do in your organizations. Before we leave, I just want to remind the participants that this is going to stay live on the Facebook page of Modena as a recording for them or colleagues or friends to watch again or to watch as new. And I just want to remind the next 2 lab talks that we are organizing. One is going to be this Friday at 4:30 p.m. It's going to be around technology for sustainability. And the next one is going to be next Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. on how to internationalize a startup. So without further ado, thank you so much again, Marian and Jochem. Thank you everyone for participating, and have a very good afternoon and evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.